Someone at Lucasfilm once claimed they had no source material to work with for new Star Wars stories. No comic books, no 800-page novels, nothing to draw from. Today, I'm going to walk you through 25,000 years of stories they threw in the trash, and you can decide if that holds up. The claim surfaced in November 2019. A senior Lucasfilm executive, and I'm going to leave the name out of this because the name doesn't matter, the words do, explained that making new Star Wars films was uniquely difficult because, unlike Marvel, there was no existing library of stories to adapt. No blueprints, no roadmap, just a blank page every single time. Nobody got angry, exactly. The reaction was closer to stunned, almost amused disbelief. Because anyone who'd spent even a single weekend exploring what Star Wars used to contain knew that claim wasn't just wrong. It was laughably, demonstrably, almost heroically wrong. By that point, the Star Wars Expanded Universe had already produced hundreds of novels, thousands of comic issues, and some of the most critically acclaimed storytelling in the entire history of licensed fiction. And on April 25, 2014, with a single corporate announcement, all of it was reclassified as Legends and declared non-canon. A newly formed story group, continuity architects including Leland Chee and Pablo Hidalgo, was tasked with building a clean timeline so new filmmakers wouldn't be shackled to decades of existing lore. Creative freedom, fair enough. But the practical effect was staggering. Thousands of characters, entire civilizations, philosophical frameworks that had pushed Star Wars into territory the films never dared explore, swept off the table overnight. And then someone said there was nothing to draw from. So let me show you what was in that drawer they refused to open. Before I walk you through any of it, I need to name the doorway most of you walked through to get here. Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic. If you've played it, you already know why we're having this conversation. If you haven't, I genuinely envy what's waiting for you. KOTOR was developed by BioWare, released July 15, 2003, set roughly 4,000 years before the original trilogy. It wasn't merely a great Star Wars game. It remains one of the greatest role-playing games ever made. A title that still shows up on all-time best lists more than 2 decades later. It sold millions of copies, swept Game of the Year awards, and it did something no Star Wars film had ever done. It made an entire generation of fans realize that the most compelling story this franchise had ever told had nothing to do with anyone named Skywalker. Then came the sequel. Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords. Obsidian Entertainment. Creative director Chris Avellone. December 6th, 2004. Where KOTOR gave you a grand, heroic journey with a twist that blew the doors off. KOTOR 2 asked whether the entire moral framework of Star Wars, light side, dark side, the Force as benevolent cosmic energy, was itself a lie. It shipped incomplete, rushed to market, and fans have spent 20 years patching it through dedicated modding communities. Even in that compromised state, it's widely regarded as containing the most philosophically sophisticated writing Star Wars has ever produced. These 2 games are the reason this era has a fan base at all. They're the shared reference point, and it would be strange, almost suspicious, to talk about the Old Republic without naming them. Quick aside, because it's relevant to the case. A full KOTOR remake was announced in September 2021, developed by Aspire Media in partnership with Sony for PlayStation 5. Almost immediately, reports surfaced of development problems, directorial changes, internal setbacks. The project shifted to Saber Interactive. As of late 2024, there's no release window, minimal public updates, and a growing sense that even the attempt to revisit this material is being fumbled. Keep that in mind. Now, the Old Republic era doesn't begin with the characters you love. It begins much further back, and I'm going to give you the 30-second version because the point isn't the details. The point is the scale. Thousands of years before the Republic existed, the Jedi Order fractured. A group who believed the dark side deserved mastery rather than suppression were exiled after a devastating internal war. Those exiles found the remote world of Korriban, discovered the Sith species, a Force-sensitive alien race with their own dark side traditions, and conquered them. They became the Sith Lords. That's the seed. Everything that follows grows from that ancient schism. 25,000 years of consequences from one broken family, and someone said there was no material. Let me introduce you to the emotional center of everything. If you already know him, you know why I'm spending time here. If you don't, pay attention, because by the time I'm done, you're going to be asking the same question I've been asking for years. Why isn't this a movie? His name is Revan. Revan starts as a Jedi, brilliant, charismatic, restless. He lives in an era when the Jedi Council still governs from a place of comfortable moral authority, dispensing wisdom from temple spires while the galaxy burns. And it is burning. The Mandalorians, united under a warlord called Mandalore the Ultimate, have launched a full-scale invasion of Republic space. Entire worlds are falling. Civilian populations are being crushed under a warrior culture built on conquest and combat glory. The Republic military can't hold. The Jedi Council's response? Nothing. They sense a hidden hand behind the invasion, some deeper manipulation, and they counsel patience, meditation, restraint. Revan looks at the bodies piling up on Outer Rim worlds and decides that patience is a luxury purchased with other people's lives. He defies the Council. Not quietly, not with a whispered rebellion. He does it loudly, publicly, with the full force of his charisma. He rallies a faction of young Jedi, the revanchists, who share his conviction that watching innocents die while you contemplate cosmic balance isn't wisdom, it's cowardice. His closest friend, a fellow Jedi named Malak, stands beside him. Together, they take command of Republic forces and march to war. Picture the trailer. A young Jedi in a mask. That mask, the red and purple visor that would become one of the most instantly recognizable symbols in Star Wars fandom, standing on the bridge of a warship as Mandalorian fleets fill the viewport. He was told not to fight. He's fighting anyway. That's Act 1. The Mandalorian Wars aren't a clean victory. They're a grinding, brutalizing campaign across dozens of systems, and Revan doesn't win them by being stronger than the Mandalorians. He wins them by being smarter. That distinction matters, because it tells you exactly what kind of character this is. Take Duxon. The jungle moon of Onderon, thick canopy, hostile wildlife, a killing field that favored Mandalorian ground tactics in every conceivable way. The Mandalorians had dug in hard, using it as a staging ground for their occupation of the Onderon system. Conventional military wisdom said you don't assault an entrenched Mandalorian position in dense jungle. You contain it, you wait them out, you accept the cost of a slow siege. Revan didn't accept anything. He adapted Republic tactics to the terrain, turned the Mandalorians' own aggressive instincts against them, and took the moon. Then Onderon itself. System by system, Revan identified what the Mandalorians expected a Republic commander to do, and then did something else entirely. He studied their warrior code, understood their psychology, and used their honor culture as a weapon against them. They expected caution. He gave them audacity. They expected conventional fleet engagements. He gave them feints, traps, and supply line strangulations that starved entire invasion corridors before a single shot was fired. The Mandalorians had never fought anyone like this. And here's what's remarkable. They respected him for it. Not begrudgingly, genuinely. There's a Mandalorian warrior named Canderous Ordo who you meet in KOTOR, and the way he talks about Revan is unlike anything else in that game. No bitterness, no excuses. Canderous describes fighting against Revan with something close to awe, the recognition of a warrior culture that the man who destroyed them was the only opponent who ever truly deserved to. He calls Revan the one who showed the Mandalorians what war really looked like. Coming from a people whose entire civilization is built around the idea that combat is sacred, that's not a grudging concession. That's the highest honor they know how to give. Canderous eventually becomes Mandalore the Preserver, the new leader of the Mandalorian people. And even then, even as the head of the culture Revan dismantled, his loyalty to Revan never wavers. That's the kind of enemy Revan was. The kind you follow even after he breaks you. But the war culminates in something far worse than broken pride. The the Battle of Malachor V. A Jedi general, the Exile, later known as Mitra Surik, who'd become the protagonist of KOTOR 2, activates a superweapon called the Mass Shadow Generator. It harnesses gravitational forces to crush everything in its radius, both fleets, both armies, the planet itself. It wins the war. It also kills thousands of Republic soldiers alongside the Mandalorians. The psychic shockwave through the Force is so catastrophic that the Exile severs her own connection to it, rather than feel what she's done. Revan defeats Mandalore the Ultimate in single combat. The Mandalorians surrender, the Republic is saved, and Revan is irrevocably changed by what it cost. Here's where the story becomes something truly extraordinary, something no Star Wars film has ever had the courage to attempt. Revan doesn't fall to the dark side because of anger, not grief, not because some Sith Lord whispered seductive promises in his ear. He falls because during the war, out in the unknown regions, he discovered something: the true Sith Empire, an emperor who'd been alive for centuries, a threat so vast and so patient that the Mandalorian Wars were just a probing action, a test to see how easily the Republic could be destabilized. Revan's fall is either a catastrophic moral collapse or a calculated strategic decision, depending on how you read it. He believed the Republic was too weak, too complacent, too governed by institutions that valued procedure over survival to withstand what was coming. So he decided to conquer it himself, to forge it into something strong enough to face the real enemy. He comes back from the unknown regions not as a broken man seduced by power, but as Darth Revan, Dark Lord of the Sith. Malak is his apprentice. The Starforge, an ancient alien space station capable of manufacturing unlimited warships, is his weapon. He wages the Jedi Civil War against the very Republic he once saved. And the tragedy, the thing that makes this story cut deeper than almost anything else in Star Wars, is that he might have been right about the threat, even if his methods were monstrous. And by the way, Disney is currently making Mandalorian content. Din Djarin, Boba Fett, Mandalorian this, Mandalorian that. You're already invested in the brand. This is the war that defined the Mandalorians. This is their Iliad, and nobody's touched it. The betrayal comes from the person closest to him. Malak, his best friend, his brother in every way that matters, fires on Revan's flagship during a battle and seizes power. Not a grand ideological schism, just ambition and jealousy rotting a friendship from the inside until the man standing next to you decides he'd rather be standing on top of you. Revan is left for dead, but a Jedi strike team led by Bastila Shan, a young knight with a rare ability called battle meditation, the power to psychically influence the morale and coordination of entire fleets, reaches him before he dies. And the Jedi Council makes a choice that is either brilliant pragmatism or an unforgivable violation. They wipe his mind, erase his identity, implant a false history, set him loose as an unwitting Republic soldier, hoping his tactical genius will lead them to the Starforge, even though he no longer remembers who he is. This is the setup of KOTOR. You spend dozens of hours building a character, making choices, forming relationships, fighting a war you believe is righteous. And then the game tells you, you are Revan. You've been Revan the entire time. Your identity, your history, your war crimes, all yours. In 2003, that twist hit like a detonation. And then the game asks the only question that matters. What do you do now? Reclaim the dark side? Or choose redemption, knowing the person you've become was built on a lie the Jedi constructed? Imagine the final shot of Act 2. The mask falls away, the memories flood back, and the audience realizes, in the same breath as the character, that every heroic moment they cheered for was performed by a man who can't remember his own atrocities. That's not a game mechanic. That's a 3-act film structure with a twist that rivals anything in cinema. And the companions surrounding Revan during this journey aren't just party members filling tactical roles. They're mirrors. Take HK-47, an assassin droid that Revan himself built during his time as a Sith Lord. HK-47 refers to all organic beings as meatbags. He says it with such cheerful, clinical contempt that it became one of the most quoted lines in gaming history. He's darkly hilarious. Players loved him instantly. But underneath the comedy, HK-47 is something deeply uncomfortable. He's a reflection of the Revan you don't remember being. Every protocol in his chassis, every assassination technique in his databanks, every coldly pragmatic calculation about the most efficient way to end a life. Revan designed all of it. HK-47 doesn't just follow Revan. He's evidence of who Revan was. When this droid cheerfully recounts the political assassinations he carried out on Revan's orders, describing the tactical elegance of each kill with genuine aesthetic appreciation, you're not just laughing at a funny robot. You're staring at the craftsmanship of a man who built a murder machine and programmed it to enjoy its work. That's the kind of character writing that makes KOTOR more than a game. You get the joke. And then the joke gets you. Bastila Shan, too, isn't just a love interest. She's a Jedi who struggles with her own attraction to the dark side, whose battle meditation makes her strategically invaluable and personally vulnerable, and whose relationship with Revan forces both of them to confront whether redemption means anything when the Jedi themselves manufactured it. She can fall. The player can pull her back or push her over. The romance isn't decoration. It's the emotional mechanism through which the game's central question about identity and free will becomes personal. After KOTOR, canonically, Revan chooses the light, defeats Malak, destroys the Starforge. His story continues into darker territory. He remembers fragments of the true Sith Emperor, ventures out alone to confront it, gets captured. The Sith Emperor imprisons him for 300 years. Not killed, kept alive. Conscious. His force energy siphoned like a battery. 3 centuries of a mind that once led armies, reduced to a power source for something that might as well be a god. When Revan finally resurfaces in Star Wars: The Old Republic, the MMO that launched in 2011, he's fractured, split between light and dark. Fans debated that resolution for years, many feeling it failed the character, which is, in itself, the most powerful proof of how deeply people care. You don't argue for years about the ending of a character who doesn't matter to you. Now, if Revan is the emotional anchor of the Old Republic, then Kreia is the intellectual one. Kreia, also known as Darth Treya, the Lord of Betrayal. She's the central figure of KOTOR 2, and Chris Avellone wrote her with the explicit purpose of deconstructing Star Wars morality itself. She isn't a villain in any conventional sense. She isn't a hero. She's something far more dangerous than either. A teacher who believes the fundamental architecture of the universe is a prison and wants to shatter it. Her philosophy goes like this: the Force isn't a gift, it's a parasite. It uses living beings as instruments in an endless, meaningless war between light and dark, recycling the same conflicts across millennia, discarding individuals the moment they've served their purpose. The Jedi are slaves to the light, who call their obedience virtue. The Sith are slaves to the dark, who call their submission power. Both are wrong. Both are being used. If you play KOTOR 2 and give money to a beggar, Kreia doesn't congratulate you. She coldly explains the chain of consequences. The beggar becomes a target for thieves, his dependence deepens, and you've solved nothing while feeling righteous about it. Every moral choice in the game gets subjected to that surgical interrogation. The effect is profoundly unsettling for a franchise that's always run on clean binaries. And here's where Revan and Kreia converge. Kreia was Revan's Jedi Master before the Wars, before the Fall. Both of them, through completely different paths, arrived at the same devastating conclusion. The system is broken. Light and dark aren't opposites locked in meaningful struggle. They're two faces of the same machine, and that machine grinds people up regardless of which side they serve. Revan's response was to try to master it, seize enough power to impose order on a galaxy he believed was sleepwalking toward extinction. Kreia's response was to try to destroy it entirely, to kill the Force itself. Neither is presented as right. Neither is presented as wrong. Fans describe this dynamic in blunt, loving terms. Both of them arrived at the same conclusion. Both sides suck. That's not a failure of moral clarity. That's a level of narrative sophistication the mainline films have never attempted. And it's also, honestly, the strongest argument that this material should never be handed to a major studio. Kreia's philosophy doesn't fit on a lunchbox. It doesn't reduce to a trailer-friendly tagline. It requires patience, ambiguity, and a willingness to let the audience leave unsettled rather than reassured. The people who love this material most know exactly what would happen if someone tried to compress it into a 2-hour blockbuster. That fear isn't irrational, it's earned. But hold that thought, because I need to show you one more piece of evidence. The villain who makes Palpatine look provincial, the Sith Emperor, Vishet. Born Tenebrae on a remote Sith world, he displayed terrifying power from childhood, killing his adoptive father with the Force, torturing his own mother. By 13, he'd conquered his homeworld through sheer dark side dominance. But that was prologue. After the Great Hyperspace War, the first major clash between the Sith Empire and the Republic, roughly 5,000 years before the original trilogy, when the Sith Lord Naga Sadow hurled an invasion fleet at Republic space and was beaten back, the Sith Empire collapsed into infighting. Vishet survived. He gathered the remaining Sith Lords under the pretense of a ritual to restore their power. What he performed instead was an act of such cosmic horror that the planet became a wound in the Force. He consumed every living thing on his homeworld of Nathema. Not killed, consumed. Drained the life force of every man, woman, child, animal, and plant on the entire world, channeling it into himself. The planet was left a lifeless husk where even the Force couldn't be felt. A dead zone in the fabric of reality. Vishet became, for all practical purposes, immortal. Imagine pitching this. Imagine Thanos, but he already won 3,000 years ago, and nobody in the galaxy knows he exists. Vishet took the surviving Sith into the unknown regions and spent over 1,000 years rebuilding in total secrecy. He was the hidden hand behind the Mandalorian Wars, the puppet master who touched Revan and Malak when they ventured too far into the dark. He's the reason Revan fell. The prison that held Revan for 300 years, and his ultimate plan dwarfs anything Palpatine ever conceived. Vishet intended to repeat the Nathema ritual on a galactic scale, consuming every living thing in the galaxy to achieve true godhood. That's not a villain. That's an extinction event with a personality. And I haven't even gotten to the supporting cast. Darth Nihilus, a being so consumed by dark-side hunger that he devours the Force energy of entire planets, a floating mask and robes with nothing human left inside. Pure cosmic horror. Darth Sion, a Sith Lord whose body is literally held together by nothing but rage and dark-side energy, broken and reassembled so many times he's more wound than man, who cannot die because his hatred won't let him. Darth Malgus, the face of the Great Galactic War, who led the sacking of Coruscant, marching into the Jedi Temple itself and burning it to the ground in a sequence so visually stunning that BioWare's SWTOR cinematic trailer, Deceived, is still widely considered superior to most actual Star Wars film content. Go watch it. 6 minutes. It's been on YouTube for over a decade. Then come back and tell me this material isn't cinematic. Each of these characters is a different flavor of moral complexity the mainline films never explored. Each one could anchor their own story, and all of them exist within an interconnected mythology spanning millennia. Exactly the kind of long-form, interwoven storytelling that the MCU proved audiences will show up for decade after decade. And Revan's shadow reaches even further than his own era. Roughly 1,000 years after Revan's death, a Sith named Darth Bane, the man who would reshape the entire Sith Order, discovered Revan's holocron. A holocron is essentially a Force-locked recording device, a repository of its creator's knowledge and personality, and Revan's contained his philosophy of power. Bane studied it, absorbed it, and from Revan's teachings, he drew the conclusion that the Sith kept destroying themselves through infighting. Too many lords, too much ambition crammed into one room, blades always turning inward. Bane's solution was radical. The rule of two. One master, one apprentice. No more, no less. That principle, Revan's intellectual DNA filtered through Bane's ruthlessness, governed the Sith for 1,000 years. It's the reason Palpatine and Vader exist as a pair. It's the reason the Sith who dominate the original trilogy operate in the shadows instead of fielding empires. Revan's ideas didn't just shape the Old Republic. They shaped the Star Wars you already know. The connective tissue is right there. And someone said there was no material. So let me lay out the full scope of what's sitting in that drawer marked Legends. The Great Hyperspace War, the Mandalorian Wars, the Jedi Civil War, the Great Galactic War, and the sacking of Coruscant. Dozens of characters with complete arcs, philosophical frameworks that challenge the fundamental premises of the franchise, cinematic set pieces that have already been visualized in trailers fans consider better than the actual films. 25,000 years of stories, specific stories, with names and dates and betrayals and moral dilemmas that don't resolve cleanly. And someone said, on camera, for the press, that there was no source material. Here's the genuine dilemma, though, and I want to ask this honestly because I think reasonable people land on both sides. Should any of this ever become a movie? Part of me, the part that pictures Revan's mask filling an IMAX screen, that imagines Malachor V rendered with a $200 million effects budget, that wants to see a general audience meet Kreia and have their comfortable Star Wars assumptions dismantled. That part screams yes. Obviously yes. This is the single greatest untapped franchise asset in entertainment. The proof is in the evidence I just laid out. But there's another part. The part that knows Kreia's philosophy would get sanded down to a villain monologue. That Revan's moral ambiguity would be resolved into a clean redemption arc by the end of Act 3, because test audiences need closure. That the player choice nature of KOTOR means millions of fans have their own personal Revan, their own version of who he is and what he chose, and a film would overwrite all of it with a single canonical answer. The track record isn't encouraging. The things that make this material extraordinary are precisely the things that resist mass-market adaptation. So I'm asking, not rhetorically, should this be adapted? Or would bringing it to the screen destroy the very thing that makes it special? What I do know, what I think is genuinely indefensible, regardless of where you land on that question, is the act of pretending it doesn't exist. You can argue about whether the Old Republic should become a film. You can't argue that there's no material to work with. Not with a straight face. Not with 25,000 years of evidence sitting right there. Subscribe for more stories like this.